If a student's needs can be met through Section 504, they do not need to be receiving special education services. So even a student that is speech only, and they're in special ed for speech only, if they have accommodations they need in the classroom, it needs to be done through the IEP. They don't need to be in 504 and special education. What 504 is students with less severe disabilities, they qualify for 504 and receive basic protections, while a more severely disabled student receives special education services under the more detailed and intensive IDEA. Interplay with special ed. So a student who is tested for special ed but does not qualify is definitely a good candidate for 504. And I've heard them say in the past that they used to have an ARD meeting, a child did not qualify, you had a 504 meeting. I'm not going to tell you that has to happen, but I don't really see why it would happen in a lot of cases. If there is an identified disability that can qualify for 504, then there's no reason not to. Likewise, students dismissed from special education are also good candidates for 504 eligibility. So when you have the ARD where they do no longer qualify for special education, you could have a 504 meeting right then. But the difference is that 504 eligibility is not automatic. So just because you tested them and they didn't qualify, it's not automatic. I mean, there's a good chance just because they're getting out of special education, it's not automatic that they get 504, but it's always an individual determination. Who is eligible? So a student to be eligible for 504 is a student with a physical or mental impairment that substantially limits one or more major life activities. Also a student with a record of an impairment or is regarded as having an impairment. So what is a physical or mental impairment? Neurological, musculoskeletal, respiratory, cardiovascular, reproductive, digestive, skin, endocrine, any psychological disorder, just to name a few. So what are major life activities? Before, under the old rules, it was walking, seeing, hearing, breathing, working, learning, manual tasks. But now they've added eating, sleeping, lifting, bending, standing, reading, concentrating, thinking, communicating, and all bodily functions. So it's not just learning. We should have a lot of kids in 504 for other reasons, not just for learning. So substantial limitation. I believe it used to be a significant impact on activity. It's no longer a significant impact on activity. So the standard is met if performing the major life activity is more difficult or burdensome than for the general population of that age. So if concentrating for this 8-year-old is harder than the average 8-year-old, that means it's a substantial limitation. It doesn't have to be significant, just substantial. So Congress does not want the standard to be difficult to meet. And then we don't consider mitigating measures, which we'll talk about here in a minute. So the information about episodic and remission and mitigating measures. So 504 evaluations are informal evaluations, except in the cases of dyslexia. They conduct an individual assessment. For the conditions that are episodic or in remission, a kid with cancer that's in remission, or a kid with seasonal allergies that is episodic, you evaluate them as if the condition is active. And so then their chances of qualifying would be much greater because you're evaluating them as if they actively have the impairment. And then you evaluate as if the mitigating measure was not in place. So if they are ADHD and they're doing well, we evaluate them as if they're not on medication. If they have a prosthetic, we evaluate them as if they don't have their prosthetic that day. They don't have their hearing devices. And then they're going to qualify for 504, not necessarily services, but will qualify for 504. So evaluations under Section 504. The duty to evaluate is triggered by suspicion of a disability and a need for services. So child find applies. There's no right to an evaluation on demand. So a parent can't come in and say, evaluate my student for 504. They really don't have that right. But we must give due process rights if we refuse to evaluate. So if we see that there is suspicion and a parent comes in and says the child needs to be evaluated and we have suspicion that there's problems, then we should evaluate.
But if that 8-year-old that doesn't concentrate, if it's not impacting his ability to not concentrate, parents just notice it at home and he's doing fine in the classroom, there's not special ed
and if they, if they demand an evaluation, a 504 evaluation, and we do not see the issue at all, then we'd have to give them their due process rights if we refuse to evaluate. And then evaluation precedes delivery of services. So we evaluate before we start providing any 504 services.
David?
Yes, sir.
Are we still telling them, when we give them the rights, are we still telling them we have a committee and that, it will go before the committee and then a determination will be made at that time?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, 504 committees. Placement decisions must be made by a group of persons who are knowledgeable about the child, understand the meaning of the evaluation data, and understand the placement and/or accommodation options. So what is an evaluation? An evaluation is basically collecting, gathering, and interpreting information. The data is from a variety of sources. It's not just information from one test from one teacher. It's a variety of sources about the student and the student's educational functioning. Parent consent is needed before we evaluate. So even though we're just looking at information, if we're considering 504, initially we need parent consent before evaluating. They also do 3-year reevaluations, but that can be done more often if necessary. And parent consent, not required to reevaluate if we're reviewing existing educational data. So really just a one-time parent consent at the beginning when we're first referring a child for 504. Okay, the decisions to be made at an evaluation. What is the physical or mental impairment? On the evaluation form, you're going to have to list what the educational diagnosis you're giving the child. Are one or more major life activities or bodily functions impaired? Is there a substantial limitation? Does it affect them compared to all other 8-year-olds? If eligible, does the student require a plan? Many students may be eligible but not require a plan. And then what accommodations or services are appropriate, or is additional data needed by the committee to establish eligibility? So students that qualify but don't need a plan are technically eligible students, which they're eligible for 504 but do not need a services plan. And these could be students that mitigating measures have fully addressed their condition and the student performs adequately in all domains of school functioning. So the student with a prosthetic leg that's going to wear it every day and is never going to go without it may be technically eligible for 504, but they don't need a services plan to address that issue. Or a student on medication that is performing well in the classroom and the student's always going to be on their medication, they may be technically eligible but don't need a plan with accommodations. The challenge of that is going to be keeping track of the students for 3-year reevaluations and doing manifestation determination reviews. If we want to send a student that's technically eligible to Denver, we still need to go back and do a manifestation determination review. That's one of their rights. So, what do Section 504 students get? They get the right to be free from actions that discriminate on the basis of their disability, the right to a manifestation determination review before disciplinary changes in placement, the right to protection from accumulations of short-term disciplinary removals. So if they're always in ISS and they're 504 or technically eligible for 504, the parent really has a right to protection from constant short-term removals. They have the right to make complaints to the Office of Civil Rights. They have the right to a Section 504 due process hearing, to periodic reevaluations, an equal right to access extracurricular activities and non-academic services. Okay, and service plan considerations. When we decide that a student is 504 eligible and they need a services plan, we link services or accommodation to the specific student needs, apply the data, and you avoid as needed. I mean, it's not going to be extra time as needed. If they need extra time, then we give them extra time, and on the form it's going to ask for a percentage of how much extra time. So it's not going to be just as needed stuff. We're going to avoid generic checklists. You take parent requests seriously, but they don't have the right to rule over the committee. And also over-accommodating can deny students' faith. But so, I mean, a parent can't say no homework, that's what I want in the 504 plan, as a committee decision, not just the parent making that decision. So other pieces of Section 504. No medical diagnosis is needed to determine disability. If you have a report from Rose Street and it gives you a psychological diagnosis, that's great. If we have a report from a doctor that says asthma or diabetes, that's great. We want to attach that to the assessment, but if we don't have that, we can still proceed because the committee is making an educational determination. So the committee can decide if this hyperactive child has attention deficit disorder educationally. We're not given a medical diagnosis, and to me that's something I think committees need to be very careful about, but that's one of the things that they can do. You match eligibility questions to the major life activity, not just to learning. Child find focus on students with obvious needs or whose parents have requested an evaluation. Campuses need to document any Section 504 training. One of the things to remember is 504 discipline is similar to special ed or IDEA discipline. Other pieces, train teachers how to gauge when a referral is needed. Document parent withdrawal or refusal of consent for evaluation. So for the student that you feel you want to evaluate, the parent refuses, we need to document that. Provide accommodations at no cost to the parent. Have a plan in place to address disability harassment. So a student in 504 or special education that's being harassed due to their disability, there needs to be a specific plan in place, not just about campus harassment, but about disability harassment as well. Make sure exclusions based on behavior extend to non-disabled students. So if we're going to keep a 504 student from a field trip due to their behavior, hopefully it will be the same behavior that would keep a non-disabled student from going on a field trip. Evaluate each student's ability to participate in non-academic programs. Understand the roles and responsibility of service animals. I mean, that could happen. Make sure teachers understand the relationship between behavior and medication. And as a social worker, I know that a lot of times that's what I deal with the other part of my job, but teachers don't necessarily need to be asking students, did you take your medication today? That's just setting them up for it. If a student says, I didn't take my medication, then then they can say, we expect you to act how you act all the time, not taking medication into account. Document attempts to motivate struggling students. Don't delay a 504 evaluation to see how medication, if a parent says, oh, we're going to put them on, I'm taking them to the doctor next month and put them on medication. There's no reason to delay the 504 evaluation and services waiting on the impact of medication on the student. Make sure RTI doesn't conflict with Section 504. If a student is Tier 3 and is struggling, and you feel that there is a reading disability and there's some proof of that, a 504 committee can meet and prove that, then that needs to take place, even though the student may still be in the RTI steps. Train nurses and attendance clerk on child find and District 504 procedures. If a student is calling in sick 3 times a week due to asthma and getting behind in homework and getting behind in everything, and they're not in 504, then the nurse or the attendance clerk needs to draw that someone's attention, so a 504 committee could possibly evaluate and determine whether or not the student would qualify for 504. It's not going to excuse them for their absences, but then the 504 committee can decide on shortened assignments or what the 504 committee feels is appropriate. So the 504 manual has been updated with all new forms. Back in May, every campus came and the campus coordinator was trained. And some of the things that they were trained on is the compliance system. It's got a copy of the compliance system documents, operational guidelines, due process hearing, child find notice, all the campus forms, the referral form, all the way down to the dyslexia form, to the general and homebound form, an overview of discipline, some test ideas, some accommodation ideas, and just important information about 504. So the campus coordinators, to me, need to have the time to train their campus staff on Section 504, be part of at least the initial evaluation committee. When a child is initially being referred for 504, the campus coordinator needs to be involved with that. They coordinate the completion of the 504 paperwork, they manage the 504 files, and make sure that each teacher receives a copy of the services plan, as well as conducts the 3-year reevaluation and any yearly updates to the services plan as needed. So that's kind of what the campus coordinator needs to be doing. Yes.
Could you tell them that they can access those electronically?
Yes, and they are online under forms with the district, and they can be typed on. Casey fixed us up where you can type on them, print them off, so they're there. Yes, Ms. Wood?
David, are you going to have another training for campus coordinators?
Yes, we are. That's over here. So there's a list of the tentative coordinators from last year over here and over here. So before you leave, if all the principals would check it, make sure it's right. If you've changed that person, write down the new person. If there's a blank by your name, that means I knew somebody moved or left and want you to fill that in. And then the new campus coordinators are going to be trained on the manual and the forms. We talked about this. No, there's not a great date. Didn't want to wait till school started. So we did Wednesday, August the 8th from 8 to 11. We're going to give that a try. So I'm going to invite all the campus coordinators to come back. It's just a refresher of the training we had in May. If they don't need to come, fine. But the new coordinators really must attend. And hopefully they will be able to find their campus book. All the campus books have the campus names on them. So hopefully they can bring their book with them, come, and on the 8th from 8 to 11, we'll go through the training again with the coordinators. And now we're going to watch an interesting little Section 504 and students from Jim Walsh. So it's an interesting little... After this, we're going to take a break.
On behalf of Park Place Publications and the law firm of Walsh, Anderson, Brown, Aldridge, and Gallegos, let me welcome you to our DVD production of Serving Students Under Section 504, or Principal Do-Right Gets It. Not familiar with Mr. Do-Right? He's the principal of Gloucesterville High School, and he's just been given an important new assignment. Let's take a look as he opens the morning mail.
Well, let's see what we have this morning. Junk. Magazine. Oh, memo from the superintendent. Let's see what this is about. Dear Principal Do-Right, congratulations. You are the new 504 coordinator for Gloucesterville High School. 504 coordinator. Oh, maybe that's transportation. Let's see.
Bus Barn, Wheel Turner.
Hey, Buzz, this is DW.
Hey, DW.
Listen, I just got a memo from the superintendent here. Tells me I am the new 504 coordinator for the high school. Do you know anything about 504?
I got a Route 504.
Well, I don't think that's it.
I got a Bus 504. It's in for an oil change right now.
Well, I don't think that's it either, but Thanks anyway. Section 504. 504. Athletics.
Locker room coach.
Coach, you right.
Uh-huh.
How you doing this morning?
Great.
Listen, I just got a memo from the superintendent. It says I am the new 504 coordinator for Blusterville High School. You know anything about 504?
I ain't gonna let no girls play on my football team.
I'm not saying anything about that.
Well, that's good, because I ain't gonna let no girls play on my football team.
Okay. Well, thanks. Section 504 coordinator.
Good morning, Mr. Do-Right.
Good morning, Holly Mae Means. Well, nice to see you. How's everything in the special education department?
Everything's peachy, especially now that I've been relieved of some of my job responsibilities.
What do you mean?
Well, I just got a memo from the superintendent that says I won't have to worry anymore about Section 504. See, I've been the 504 coordinator for this high school for the past 2 years, but now he's putting you in charge. Congratulations, Mr. Do-Right.
Well, you're the one I should be talking to. See, I just got this memo from the superintendent. It made me the 504 coordinator, but I don't know what that means. So, fill me in.
Well, Section 504 of the 1973 Rehabilitation Act is a federal law.
Oh, it's a law.
A federal law that applies to schools that receive federal financial assistance, like we do.
Oh, well, that's great. I'm good with laws and stuff. What's this law require?
It requires non-discrimination. Here, let me show you. It's actually quite short. No otherwise qualified individual with a disability in the United States, as defined by Section 70520 of this title, shall, solely by reason of her or his disability, be excluded from the participation in, be denied the benefits of, or be subjected to discrimination under any program or activity receiving federal financial assistance. That's the crux of it. Non-discrimination against people with disabilities.
Well, I think we got all this covered. I mean, you remember last year we got the high school renovated? They did a lot of work around here. They widened the doors to the bathrooms, and they lowered the drinking fountains for the kids in wheelchairs, and we got plenty of handicap parking out there. I think we got this all covered.
Oh, our building is physically accessible, all right, but I think you'll find that there's more to the Section 504 job than that. That's why I'm glad the superintendent passed it on to you. But I'll be here to help in any way that I can.
Well, I appreciate that, Holly Mae, but I have to tell you, I think this is going to be pretty simple. Why, all it says is, don't discriminate. This is going to be a piece of cake.
A piece of cake? I don't think so, Mr. Do-Right. Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act of 1973 has actually produced a good deal of confusion among school administrators. That's why we decided to create this training product. In this DVD, we hope that you, and Mr. Do-Right, will come to understand some of the basics of how Section 504 applies to students. In particular, we will focus on what students are covered by Section 504. What's the difference between an impairment and a disability? What is a mitigating measure, and what's that got to do with Section 504? And what about extracurricular activities? So let's get started as we return to Blusterville High School, where Mr. Do-Right patrols the halls.
Hey, you, off with that cat.
Oh, my bad, Mr. Do-Right.
Hey, Mr. Do-Right.
Holly Mae, how are you doing today?
Pretty well. I just wanted to let you know how much I appreciate you being the 504 coordinator, and so I bought you a little present.
Well, that's very nice. Thank you.
Well, I know how much you liked being a coach before you were our principal, so I wanted to let you know that being the 504 coordinator is kind of like being a coach.
Wow, 504 coach. That's great. I don't have to be the coordinator. I could be the 504 coach. This is going to be terrific.
Mr. Do-Right, I mean Coach Do-Right, burns the midnight oil as he pores over the federal law and regulations. First of all, Mr. Do-Right needs to know what kids are covered by Section 504. Which student should be in Mr. Do-Right's program? So he studies the definition. Students are covered by Section 504 if
They have a physical or mental impairment that substantially limits the student in one or more major life activities. They have a record of such an impairment, or they are regarded as having such an impairment.
early the next day, Mr. Do-Right goes classroom to classroom, looking for students who should be in his 504 program.
No iPods!
Mr. Bunsen, can I interrupt you for a moment?
Of course, Mr. Do-Right. Darlene, don't touch that flask. Yeah, and class, everyone with their safety goggles. Safety first. Safety first. 504 coach. What's that all about?
I'm the new 504 coach for the high school. I just took over from Miss Meanswell. I was appointed by the superintendent. And I intend to make sure that we have the best 504 program in the county. Now, this is all about kids with impairments, disabilities, kids who need a little help, kids who are at risk. I'm sure you've got some kids that fit that profile, and I need to find out who they are, Mr. Bunsen. I'm going to put them in our 504 program.
Well, I've heard of Section 504. I don't really understand it all. I'm not really sure what you're looking for. Texting! No! Texting! No! Texting!
My bad, Mr. Bunsen.
There is one student who comes to mind. Jose.
Jose, well, tell me about Jose.
A fine young man. I'm not really sure he understands what's going on here. He and his family just moved here from Central America a few weeks ago. He speaks no English. I'm not even sure he understands it. I try to communicate with him as best I can. As far as I can tell, he never attended school in his home country. iPods away!
Yes, sir.
He definitely needs support, otherwise I'm sure he'll drop out.
Well, Jose is exactly the type of student I'm looking for. Mr. Do-Right will do right by Jose. Anybody else?
Well, there's Lisa.
Lisa. Tell me about Lisa.
She's another one that I worry about. She works really hard. She tries her best. Ah! Beaker! Beaker! Oh. Well, Lisa, she was in the special education program last year, and she had an IEP and all the support that the special ed folks give. Then they dismissed her, said she was ready for regular ed, didn't need special ed anymore. I hope they're right, I'm not so sure.
Well, Lisa sounds again just like the type of student I'm looking for. Mr. Do-Right will do right by both Lisa and Jose. Thank you, Mr. Bunsen.
Anything I can do to help. Science knows, Mr. Hornsbottle!
Say, would you like to borrow my taser?
But Mr. Do-Right, Jose doesn't belong in your program.
What do you mean he doesn't belong in the program? This program's all about impairments and disabilities and stuff like that. And Jose's loaded with impairments and disabilities. Why, number one, he doesn't speak English. Have you ever traveled in a foreign country, Miss Meanswell? I can relate to this. Last year on vacation, Miss Do-Right and I, we went down to Mexico. Yeah, we had a great time, but I have to tell you, once I got past dos margaritas, por favor, well, I needed a lot of help. I was pretty well lost. Now, we need to recognize that's what it's like for Jose here. That's an impairment. He needs a lot of help. He's at risk.
Yes, Jose needs help, and we should do for him whatever we can. But let's take a closer look at the law. It says a physical or mental impairment. Now, do you have any reason to believe that Jose has a physical or mental impairment?
Well, he physically can't speak English, and he physically has never been in school.
Yes, Jose is an English language learner, and we should do everything we can to help him. But he doesn't have a physical or mental impairment. Let's not label someone as disabled who isn't.
Well, I can see your point, but Now what about Lisa? Now Lisa has a record of an impairment, and it says right there in the book that 504 covers kids that have a record of an impairment. She was in your special ed program, then she got dismissed. She still has a record of an impairment, so she's covered by 504. Isn't that right?
Yes, it is. And that means that we should never discriminate against Lisa because of that record. But that's all. We don't have to provide her any accommodations or services. She doesn't have a physical or mental impairment that substantially limits her. She just has a record of that in the past.
It's confusing.
Right you are, Mr. Do-Right. It is confusing. But Holly Mae is correct. Neither Jose nor Lisa is entitled to special accommodations or services under Section 504. Section 504's definition of students with disabilities is broad, but it does not cover all struggling students. It does not have the same meaning as at risk. Section 504 is designed to cover the students whose impairments are physical or mental. How do we know this? Let's take another look at that three-pronged definition. 504 covers kids who
Have a physical or mental impairment that substantially limits the student in one or more major life activities, have a record of such an impairment, or are regarded as having such an impairment.
the kids in the first group currently have a physical or mental impairment that substantially limits them in a major life activity. The other two groups do not. Instead, they have a record of a past disability, or they are erroneously regarded as having a disability. The students who fall into the second and third prongs of this definition are protected from discrimination. These students must be afforded equal access and opportunity. If the school discriminates against a student because of a perceived disability or a record of a disability, that student will have a legal claim against the district. However, only students who fall into the first category, those who have a physical or mental impairment that substantially limits a major life activity, are entitled to a special program. So that clears the air a good bit with regard to who is covered by Section 504. But Mr. Do-Right is still a bit confused. Let's see how he handles this meeting with the mother of Andy Candy, who has recently visited the doctor.
Oh, Mr. Do-Right, I'm just so worried about Andy. He should be doing so much better in school. You know, his older sister was valedictorian. We know Andy's bright. He just isn't doing as well as he should. Why, on his last report card, he got a C.
There, Mrs. Candy.
And we took him to Dr. Fixit, and guess what he said? He's got ADD.
Oh no, not ADD.
Read this.
Andy Candy has attention deficit disorder and should be in the Blusterville High School Section 504 program. Wow. Mrs. Candy, thank you for bringing this to me. This is exactly the type of information I need. Why, I just got appointed as the 504 coach for the high school. And with this type of information from the doctor, I can get Andy into the 504 program next week. Wait till you see what a difference that'll make.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Do-Right.
You can't put Andy Candy in your program. He doesn't belong.
What are you talking about? Andy's got a physical or mental impairment, and I got the proof right here. Here's Dr. Fixit's official prescription.
Does Dr. Fixit say what is the major life activity that's affected by Andy's ADD?
Major life activity? What are you talking about?
Okay, let's look at the definition. A physical or mental impairment that substantially limits the student in a major life activity. So what is Andy's major life activity?
Algebra.
Let's look at the definition. It doesn't include algebra. Major life activities include, but are not limited to, caring for oneself, performing manual tasks, seeing, hearing, eating, sleeping, walking, standing, lifting, bending, speaking, breathing, learning, reading, concentrating, thinking, communicating, and working. Now, does Andy have any of those significant problems?
Well, I'm telling you, he got a C in algebra on his last report card.
I looked at his report cards for the last 2 years. Straight A's and 1C. He's on the honor roll and in advanced placement classes, and he is not substantially limited.
But the doctor says he's got ADD.
Yes, and that's an impairment, but an impairment does not equal a disability.
It's confusing.
Hang in there, Mr. Do-Right. You'll get this thing figured out eventually. You see, every part of the definition of disability is important. Andy Candy has a diagnosis of an impairment, but it sounds like Andy is not substantially limited by that impairment, so he does not have a disability. Impairment and disability do not have the same meaning. Most of us have an impairment of some sort. Being impaired means that you function less than perfectly. Do you wear glasses? You have an impairment.
An impairment becomes a disability only when it substantially limits the person in the performance of a major life activity.
In Andy's case, the major life activity we are concerned about is learning, along with things like concentrating, reading, and thinking. Andy's doing quite well in school. He may have an impairment, but he does not have a disability. Andy is not eligible for services under Section 504. But just when Mr. Do-Right thinks he's got that figured out, a new complication arises. Let's consider Jason Jitterbug.
As you can see, Mr. Do-Right, Dr. Fixit has prescribed 504 services to my client. There you have it.
Jason Jitterbug has attention deficit disorder and should be in the Blusterville High School Section 504 program. Very interesting, counsel. Looks to me like your client does in fact have an impairment, a physical or mental impairment. But you know, I've been looking at Jason's records and he's having a very good year in school. He's passing all of his subjects and I'm getting good reports from every one of his teachers. I'm sure you're aware, counsel, that we accommodate students under Section 504 when they have a physical or mental impairment that substantially limits them in a major life activity. Looks to me like your client doesn't qualify. He has an impairment. He doesn't have a disability.
I see you've done your homework, Mr. Do-Right. But how far back into Jason's record did you go?
Oh, I went all the way to the start of the school year.
I see. And what do you remember about Jason last year?
Last year, I was a train wreck last year.
Well, that's for sure. I mean, last year, Jason was in my office on a discipline referral every other day, more than any of the other students.
And I failed 4 out of 6 classes.
That's right. I don't know what happened. We were all surprised. It looked to me like a minor miracle occurred.
I'll tell you what happened. Have you ever heard of mitigating measures?
Mitigating measures, indeed. In 2009, Congress changed our laws that apply to disability-based discrimination, including Section 504. As a result of these changes, schools are now required to disregard mitigating measures when determining if an impairment substantially limits a major life activity. What does that mean? Well, the term mitigating measures refers to things that lessen the impact of an impairment. Here are some examples of things that are now considered mitigating measures. Medication, low vision devices, but not ordinary eyeglasses or contact lenses. Prosthetics, hearing aids. Mobility devices, the use of assistive technology. Reasonable accommodations or auxiliary aids or services, and learned behavioral modifications. Notice that medication is the first thing on the list. So if Jason's improved performance is in fact due to the medication, then he would still qualify as a person with a disability under Section 504. As the school year progresses, Mr. Do-Right is starting to understand that Section 504 applies to all aspects of the school's program. Let's look in as he and his trusty mentor, Holly Mae Meanswell, meet with Hilda Hoops, the girls' basketball coach.
Now, how do you expect a blind girl to play on our basketball team? Honestly, Miss Meanswell, I don't think you know the first thing about basketball. You can't play if you're blind. Now, I'm sorry if that offends you, but that's just the way it is.
Jessica is not blind. She's visually impaired. She She's been in my special education program all year and is doing quite well.
Well, that's great, but she can't be on my team.
Jessica played basketball last year for Mudball High School. She has vision, it's just limited. Mudball accommodated her. She was a member of the team, she went on all the trips, she even played in a few games.
And I suppose you're gonna tell me she was the leading scorer?
Coach, Jessica will never be an all-star, but she played in a few games and she made 2 free throws.
Excuse my French. Jessica has a right to go to school here, but she does not have the right to play basketball. Athletics is a privilege, not a right. No blind girls on my team.
Visually impaired.
Look, I take the 15 best basketball players. That's the way we always do it, and that's the way it stands.
Coach, you didn't even let her try out. You don't even really know how good she is at basketball. That's why we got this complaint from her parents.
I don't have time for this. Mr. Do-Right.
Now, Holiday, I know we have to comply with all these laws, but extracurricular activities, that's different. Coach is correct. Participation in athletics, that's a privilege, that's not a right.
Mr. Do-Right, I can see we're going to have another one of our talks.
As Mr. Do-Right is about to learn, Section 504 requires non-discrimination in all school activities, not just academics. It applies to athletics, in the cafeteria, on the bus, and in everything else the school does. And non-discrimination means that all kids have an equal opportunity to participate in all school activities. Will Jessica qualify for that highly competitive Gloucesterville basketball team? We don't know. But we do know that the school cannot prejudge her based on her impairment. It has to give her an opportunity to try out for the basketball team. It has to assess her ability, not her disability. We hope we've provided you with a good introduction to Section 504. We don't have time to go into all of the ins and outs of this federal law, but let's point out a few key points.
Number 1, decisions about students in Section 504 should be individualized. Do not assume. Do not generalize. Look over each case individually when determining eligibility or services.
Number 2, decisions should be based on current evaluations and observations conducted by qualified people.
Number 3, decisions regarding 504 services must be made by a group of people, not an individual. Regulations refer to a knowledgeable group of people. Most school districts refer to this as 504 committee or 504 team.
Number 4, 504 imposes procedural requirements on school districts similar to those imposed by special education law. Parents have the right to notice of certain actions by the school, and they have the right to challenge school decisions.
Action! Action!
Number 5, long-term discipline of a 504 eligible student requires compliance with some special procedures. It is very important for principals and assistant principals to know if a student is 504 eligible before imposing a long-term consequence.
Number 6, many of the students who meet Section 504's criteria also qualify for help under the Special Education Law IDEA. Jessica, our basketball player, is one of these students. For those students, the schools that fulfill the obligations under IDEA are also complying with Section 504. Kids who have an IEP under the Special Education Law do not need Section 504 plan. For those students, complying under IEP fulfills the school's responsibilities under both laws.
Number 7, teachers must take 504 plans seriously. If the 504 committee has developed a written plan to accommodate a student in the regular classroom, the teacher must do what they can to facilitate that plan and implement it faithfully.
Number 8, school officials must not assume based on a disability that a student cannot do something. Schools made great progress in finding ways to include students with disabilities in all manner of activities.
Number 9, Section 504, like our special education law, requires that students be served in the least restrictive environment. As a general rule, Section 504 students should be served in the regular classroom at the school that they would normally attend if not disabled.
And number 10, your 504 coach needs and deserves your support. This very simple federal law has spawned all manner of confusion and litigation. Your school gets no extra funding to help it comply with Section 504, but it's expected to do so out of existing resources. So, Section 504 challenges the creativity and the resourcefulness of today's educators. But we're confident that your 504 coach is up to the challenge. Why, it seems that even Mr. Do-Right, after a few months on the job, is beginning to get it.
Well, Mr. Do-Right, we've had a pretty rough go of it, but it looks like you're doing really well as 504 coordinator. I mean, coach.
Well, thank you, Holly Mae. I sure couldn't have done it without your support, but I do think things are going pretty well, and I think the kids are getting better services.
Well, that's really terrific. So give me an example. What about that boy you told me about, PJ? Tell me about PJ.
Well, I'll tell you, PJ, now he was a case. We started out with PJ, we thought about IDEA. You know, DL 94-142. We thought he might be ED, LD, OHI due to ADD, ADHD. We figured we'd have to give him an IEP, place him in the LRE, even consider ESY, OT, PT, and other ATDs. So when we thought about all that, we even looked at the SCA and the OCR guidelines, and we really studied the DSM-RIV. We wanted to be sure we did it right. But we RTI'd him, we IEP'd him, we FIE'd him. Turned out the kid was DNQ, AID is OUT. Then we thought 504. We slapped an FBA on him and a BIP, the kid is 504. PJ is A-OK.
So it's got to be English, or LPAC has got to sign off saying, yes, they want the child referred for special education. The next thing we need is the environmental checklist. And you guys should have all these like in the SST folders that's on the computer somewhere. Anyway, if you are looking at the environmental checklist, at the top of the page, one of the things it says is if 5 or more of the factors are checked off, we're probably not looking at a learning disability or a behavior disability. We're looking at probably a social or cultural problem. So we really need to look when we're looking at that environmental checklist. If we've got a lot of checks going on, we might need to rethink, are we really looking at a child who might be eligible for special education? Okay. The next thing we need is a copy of the tiers. This needs to be per subject level that you have concerns about. So let's just say you have a concern in math and reading, but we only get RTI information in math. We cannot test in reading because we don't have that research to back it up as to why we're testing in reading. I'm not saying you didn't do it, but we need the information because that's got to go according to IDEA and TEA into our report. So anytime you have a concern for a child for a subject area, please include all RTI information. If we're concerned with just math, just put math. If we're concerned with reading in math, put reading in math. But we do need a per subject to be tested. The next thing that you guys have, that you can have, is the speech checklist. Now, for speech or language evaluations, the checklists include artic, fluency or stuttering, language, and voice. If you have a concern in just articulation, the way a child says their sounds, you don't have to fill out the language, voice, and fluency. Just fill out the area you're concerned about. If you're concerned with a child stuttering, just fill out the fluency one. Don't fill out the rest of them, because that's a lot of paperwork. Your teachers don't need to be bogged down with any more paperwork than they're already bogged down with. If the child has had a behavioral consult and the consult says they want to refer for an FIE to include a psychological consult, that needs to be attached to your pre-referral. That way we can see that the behavior people have gone in, or somebody has gone in from the behavior team, and they see some problems, and so it's okay to say, yes, the LSSPs can go in and do some testing. There's also a form in the SST folder called Information to be Submitted with Tiers. That form includes information if the child's been retained, if the child's on medication, and if there's any health or behavioral concerns that you guys see. Maybe not necessarily from the behavioral team, but what you guys might note in the classroom. So please fill out that form, because we also use that form for our report. The RTI paperwork is pretty thorough, but it's missing some of this information that's on this particular form. And then anything else your SST feels is valuable for us to know when we're doing our testing, go ahead and attach that also. Once you get all that pre-referral stuff done, give it to your DIAG. Your DIAG's going to check it over to make sure everything's really there, and then they're going to give you the referral packet. Okay, your referral packet contains a blue page if the child's school age, or a yellow page if the child's not in school yet. So you'll need that page. You'll also need to have the parent fill out the pink page. The pink page, a lot of times what happens is you guys will send it home, and the parent doesn't send it back, and doesn't send it back, and doesn't send it back, and it kind of holds up the process. If you guys will, when they come up to actually sign consent to do the testing, have them fill out the pink page first. That way you've got it, and it's not going to get lost in the shuffle, because then we have to wait on that. So you need the blue page and the pink page. Then you need a notice of proposal for evaluation. And this is all coming from Exceed. This is from your DIAG. And on this, you don't need the parent to sign it. This is just giving the parent information on why we're testing, and also it has a name and a phone number of who to call if they have any questions. Give them a copy of that, but then also keep a copy of it with your referral packet. The next thing is a receipt for explanation of procedural safeguards and the ARD guide. Those are those two booklets that are a lot of words that you've got to give the parents. The parents, before they sign consent, are supposed to have those explained to them. And then they sign that yes, you explained it to them, and then you sign, or whoever the person is that does it from your school, sign saying you explained it. Again, that's a lot of work to go through. Carol, perhaps what I can do in another session with, I don't know who all does their pre-referral and referral stuff. I don't mind coming and giving them highlighted copies apiece of what to say. I mean, that might be handy, give them a little more information on what to say. Okay? Anyway, as far as that goes, when the parent signs it and dates it, and you sign it and date it, those dates have to be the same. You can't date it after, and you can't date it before. Those dates have got to be the same for you and the parent. Then you've got your consent for full and individual evaluation. My advice is to read it to the parent, because I found when I've been doing these things, I might not always know that the parent can't read. So I just go ahead and I read it to the parent. It doesn't take very long. And I need them to check yes or no on every single box. The killer of it is if they check no, we can't evaluate. So make sure if you see somebody check no, ask them why. Because they might not have understood why they checked no, they might just have checked it. So please, it's all gotta be checked yes if you need an evaluation from special ed. Then again, parent signs it, whoever has gotten the permission signs it, the dates have to be the same. And then you'll turn your completed referral packet into the DIAG, and then what happens now? From the date the parent signs it, we, the evaluation personnel, we have 60 calendar days to do any kind of testing that we suspect. If we suspect the child has a learning disability in math, if we suspect the child has ADHD, if we suspect the child has a speech problem or OT, we have 60 days to get the child tested and the report written. Now, we try to do it before then, but by law, that's what we have. The areas of evaluation that we look at, whether it's formally or informally, for every single child, is language, and that includes expressive and receptive language, physical, which is the vision and hearing screening, fine and gross motor, emotional and behavioral, and that can be observation if we're not concerned about an emotional disturbance or ADHD, sociological, intellectual and adaptive behavior, and then the academic part, the learning competencies. There are 13 categories that we look at in the state of Texas as handicapping conditions, and they're as follows: auditorily impaired, autism, deaf-blind, emotional disturbance, intellectual disability, which is formerly MR, multiple disabilities, orthopedic impairment, other health impaired, the learning disability, speech impaired, which includes language, traumatic brain injury, visual impairment, and non-categorical early childhood. Now what that is the children are between 3 and 6 years of age. We are concerned, we've got suspicion that they might be intellectually disabled, they might be learning disabled, emotionally disturbed, or autistic. But we don't want to, at this age, give them that particular handicapping condition. So we give them non-categorical because we suspect that's what it is. But that has to be removed by the time they're 6. By their 6th birthday, that handicapping condition has to change to something else. You'll also notice that several of these have asterisks by them. The reason why they have asterisks by them is because those are the ones that involve doctors. And it's got to be a DO or an MD. It can't be like a physician's assistant or nurse practitioner. It's got to be a medical person to sign off saying, yes, this is what this child has. It goes along with the educational. Okay, as far as the evaluation goes, the student will not be determined to be a child with a disability if there is a lack of appropriate instruction in reading or math or limited English proficiency. Now, that's basically a lot for, we're talking about learning disabilities, because you know that a child that's intellectually disabled is going to have problems across the board. Also, when we're doing evaluation, we look at excessive absenteeism. We have to take that into account with any disability. And then the student must have an educational need for special education and related services and meet the eligibility criteria for special education and related services. So that's 2-prong right there. Within 30 calendar days of the finished report, then we have to hold the ARD meeting and go over the results with the parent and with you guys. Questions? So I'm going to do this presentation again a little bit more in detail for the teachers during staff development, and they'll see all of Fat City, but I wanted to go ahead and show just a couple of things for you guys. Here we go.
Okay, on to the next page, go. Raise your hands and tell me what's on this page. Just look at your own books. Look at your own books, please. You know what that is, Elaine? Yes or no? Yes or no? You know what it is? Yes or no? Just yes or no answer. You know what that is, Tom? Yes or no? You know what that is, Karen? Yes or no? You know what that is, Stephanie? Yes or no? You know what that is, Karen? Yes or no? Yes or no, Karen?
No.
Yeah, but you know what that is? Yes or no? Okay? Let's work with Debbie here, okay? Let me show you what happens with the learning disabled child in the classroom when he's unable to perceive. There's basically 4 things a teacher does when the child cannot perceive something. Here's the first thing that teachers do. Each one is a little bit silly if you don't want to find it. Here's the first thing that teachers do. Debbie, tell me what that is. Debbie, look at it. Debbie, look at it. Here it comes. Debbie, look at it harder. See, I don't know what that means. I have teachers for years tell kids to look at something harder. I have no idea what that means. I don't know what that means. I mean, I can push harder or pull harder, but I can't look at something harder. So the first thing we do is we tell them to look at it harder. That doesn't work. We do this. Debbie, put the book. You don't have to turn the book around. Second thing we do is we say we're going to give them something. Debbie, would you please tell me what that is? Tell me what that is, and you can be first in line for recess. Did that help? Why do we do that? Why do we do that as teachers? The child can't do something, so we automatically promise them something if we can. That would be like if I took my child to the hospital with a temperature of 105 degrees, and I went to the doctor and I said, "Doctor, my child's got a temperature of 105 degrees." And the doctor said, "Here, I tell you what, here, I'll give you this $1. I'll give you this $1 if you can get it down to 102, son." How would that be? You would expect the doctor to give some sort of medicine. You wouldn't expect the doctor to try to bribe your child out of his temperature, and yet that's what we do with kids. We try to bribe them by giving them things. Did that help, Debbie?
It's a man.
No. Okay, all right. Okay.
It's got a coat on.
All right, we do three things. We basically do, now the third thing we do is we begin taking things away. We begin taking things away from the child. Tell me what that is, or tell me what that is, you can't go to recess. Tell me what that is, or drop you down the reading group. When that doesn't work, we go into our fourth mode, which is something that I find very distressing as a personality trait that many, many teachers have, and that is we do what's called blaming the victim. What we do is we blame Debbie. We say the reason Debbie can't tell me what this is she's not what? Trying hard enough. You see, what that reflects is what we call blaming the victim. That reflects blaming the victim. What we say is the reason the child can't tell me what this is that the child is not motivated. It's a motivational problem. Because we all know that the answer to learning disabilities is motivation, right? The key to overcoming learning disabilities is motivation, correct? Wrong. Wrong. Motivation is one of the most misunderstood concepts in education today. Motivation only enables us to do, to the best of our ability, what we are already capable of doing. Let's try it a little bit more. Debbie, can you tell me what this is now? Yes or no? Yes or no, Debbie?
I don't know what that thing is.
Okay, here we go, Debbie. I'm going to check, blank check for $100. I will sign this over to you if you can tell me what this is in 5 seconds. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. 5 more seconds for $100. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Was Debbie motivated? Was Debbie motivated? Could she do it? No. Because you see, learning disabilities has very little to do with motivation. What it really has to do with is perception. Perception. You see, you can all see this picture, but you can't perceive it. Here's what I'm going to do. I am now going to give you some direct instruction. Once I tell you what this is, or half of you will automatically get it, and you won't understand why you couldn't see it in the first place. The rest of you will need a little extra help, and that's okay too. There'll also be some of you who will say, "Oh yeah, I know what that is," but you really don't. Don't do that, okay? Don't do that. Try, you really want to, once you see it, it's like turning on a light in a dark room. But this is a classic picture that illustrates the difference between vision and perception. You can all see it, but you can't bring meaning to it until I teach you what it is. And this activity is done to demonstrate what the LD child needs is a teacher. He needs a teacher, not necessarily all kinds of commercial software. What he needs is a teacher to give him this direct instruction, because once I give you this direct instruction, you will be able to see this perfectly clearly. What you have in front of you is a photograph, a poor quality photograph, but the photograph of the face of a cow. The cow is looking directly in your face. Raise your hand if you cannot see it. I'll come around and show it to you. Raise your hand if you can't see it. Face of the cow. Anybody over here not see it? Anybody not see it? Nancy? Face of the cow. Over here, anybody not see it? Not going to see it? Carol. Carol? It's the face of the cow. Okay, all right. Elaine? Face of the cow. Okay, anybody back here, Susan? Yeah? We better keep that in mind as we talk about the critical moral value of fairness. Because as I speak to parents and teachers all over this country, I see classrooms and families being run based on the adult's concept of honesty, the adult's concept of truth, the adult's concept of liberty, patriotism, religion, and yet those same families and classrooms are being run based on the child's concept of fairness. What I'd like you to do when the session is over tonight is go home, walk into your attic, pull down your old philosophy books from high school or college, or even take out a Webster's dictionary and look up the definition of fairness. Fairness does not mean that everyone gets the same. Fairness actually means that everyone gets what he or she needs. And yet still, I'll deal with teachers where I'll say to a teacher, Jody's going to be in your class next semester, teacher. She's a wonderful kid, very bright kid. She's going to do very well in your math class. But she's got a learning disability, and it's called a 5-point copying problem, and she can't copy off the blackboard. So here's what I'd like you to do. When you put problems on the blackboard for everyone to copy, I'd like you to write out an extra set for Jody and give that to Jody. And if that doesn't work, you don't have time for that, please, pretty quick, maybe we could write out 2 sets. And then hand one across to Jody, or even put a piece of carbon paper on the lead sheet, so when she writes up one set of problems and the next one automatically give to Jody. I'd like you to do that, please. Invariably, the teacher will say, I can't do that. And I say, why not? There's a lot of answers I'll accept. I'll accept because I don't know how. I'll accept because I don't have time. I'll accept because I don't believe in mainstreaming. I'll accept because I don't like Jody. I will go to the mat with the teacher and I will discuss any one of those answers with the teacher. The one answer I will not discuss, the one answer that I think is beneath contempt and beneath discussing, is the answer I hear most often. And that is, I can't do that for Jody. Why? It's not fair to the others. It's got nothing to do with the others. Jody needs it, the others don't. It has nothing to do with the others. Let's take it and try it in an adult situation. Suppose I'm up here lecturing. In the middle of my lecture, God forbid, in the middle of my lecture, Carolyn here falls off her chair. I look down at her, she's turning blue, cardiac arrest. God forbid she's having a heart attack right in front of us. And I'm trained in CPR techniques, so I know what to do. How ludicrous, how unfair, how absolutely foolish and unethical would it be for me to say, hey, Carolyn, I'd like to help you, I really would. But heck, we've got 30 people here. I haven't got time to give CPR to everybody, and it wouldn't be fair to only give it to you. But the teacher who says, I can't help the elderly child because it's not fair to the others, is working at the same moral level as a 10-year-old child. And this is particularly important for you as parents to understand. Because I know a lot of parents, especially these kids, who spend full time beating themselves up and trying to keep the scales balanced. What do? Johnny, the LD child, needs a special tutor. How do I make that up to the other kids so that I'm fair to everybody? You don't have to. As long as you can look in the eyes of the siblings and say, honey, if it was you, I'd be doing the same thing. Fairness does not mean that everyone gets the same. Fairness means that everyone gets what he or she needs. And we're not going to be able to work successfully with the child, mainstream child, no disabled child, mainstream classroom, until teachers and parents begin to understand that in order to be fair, we've got to treat them.
So in and of itself, a lot of things haven't changed in 20-something years. But I did want to just close with one parting little thought. It's a learning disability, it's a real challenge, it's educating those who don't have one. Again, it's a hidden disability, it's hard to explain, but hopefully that's kind of giving you a little bit of an insight on learning disabilities. Thank you for your support.
So what I'm going to talk to you a little bit about is the referral process for behavior issues this year. Not very different from last, but I do want to point out a couple of new things, and we're going to continue to work on this because, you know, our goal on the behavior support team and in special education is student achievement. And we want to help you accomplish that on your campuses, and we know sometimes that behavior does get in the way. So we want to help you to help them to do better, to be better, to act better. One thing I do want to do first of all is I'm going to pass around the sheet. A couple of years ago when we started this process, we came up with an idea that we needed a campus behavior designee. And we don't want you to think about assigning someone to that or having somebody to do. It can be your SST chair, it can be your assistant principal, it can be your principal. It just depends on your campus because there is such a wide variety of campuses in here. It's different on every campus, and that's kind of what I just need to know someone we can contact who's going to contact us whenever we need these behavior referrals dealt with. So whomever it is on your campus, if these are programs just for principals, so if you'll write in who that person is, that will give us an idea of who we need to be talking to as we as we work together throughout the year.
And we need to make one for every table, so fill it out on your table and hand it for the next table, please.
So while that's going around, I do want to talk just a little bit, and Dave's going to pass out a one-page handout. I didn't prepare a PowerPoint, but because I did want to keep it short, and I really want to show you just how to manipulate and maneuver some things on our website and on our launcher this year. A little bit about crisis. We do want to help y'all in response to some of that on your campus. For the first 2 weeks, we're going to do, as we have in the past few years, we're going to have a behavior support team member on your campus or with your campus to help you deal with some of those crises that come up, first of the year things, new kids moving in, or somebody, experiencing some extreme difficulties that can't quite get it together. But we will have somebody assigned to your campus, and that behavior support team member will be contacting probably each or every one of you. I don't know who they'll talk to, but they'll be on your campus in the first couple of days of school to let you know who they are and give you their cell phones and ways to contact them so that if we do have some crises, especially initially, we can get to them quickly. Otherwise, at the top of this handout, we have just some things that might define what a crisis might be. One being an evaluation or a student with a neurological disability that's, maybe not had one in the past, or maybe just extreme behavior that you're not used to seeing in a student, that they're self-injurious. Of course, we want you to be sure and respond, first responder really. Campus administrator, that should be your first responder initially. And so, of course, if there's a need for emergency personnel, you need to probably notify them first too, but we do want to be there to help you to deal with that crisis and to help get the situation under control. So if a crisis does occur on your campus, the people that we would like for you to try to contact or definitely make it know is your campus administrator. Then you can contact me as a secondary supervisor, and you can contact Suzanne as the elementary supervisor. What we can do for you is we can get other members of our behavior support team, possibly even us, out there as soon as we can to help you to diffuse it or deal with it or figure out what we need to do next if that's an issue. Most of y'all, all of y'all, deal with it in such a great way that I don't see that issue happening, but if it is. And then also, Cindy Moses is our new director of special education, and she can also be contacted there. And we've got cell phones and ways to contact those other people, and we can get them to you as quickly as possible. So that's really kind of the crisis end of it. Try to get one. I have plenty. I think I found one. Now, in dealing with the behavior, this is actually, I go to the launcher, the SST. This is actually on your launcher. If in all that mess last year you lost it on your launcher, you need to contact Deanne Woodard. And she can pull this, it's the SST folder, which is it looks different this year. Special. But the SST folder is going to have all of this stuff in there, which is kind of nice. What you've got is, let's see, hang on. I'm going to go into the behavior referral. So you're going to click in there. This is actually just, hang on. This is the consultation referral process. And I've not updated these, so as soon as I'm going to get them updated in the next couple of days, and Casey's going to help me get them back into the folder in their new 2012-2013 look. But what we're going to do here is just kind of work through this. Initially, what we have is an RTI process for behavior. In the Tier 1 interventions, there is, in this folder, go up to the top, David, Behavior RTI Tier Interventions. There's going to be Tier 1, Tier 2, and Tier 3 interventions in this folder that you can access. There's also, didn't bring it up, sorry, behavior box. Everyone should have a behavior box on your campus. Remember those physical behavior boxes for some of the cell school girls that like to have a physical piece of paper? Those are on your campus as well. And then you'll minimize that and go to the website. Something new and exciting and improved that Ashley Thomas is, oh my gosh, she's going to be my new shero. I use one of Rhonda's words. She is, go to the WFISD website. We're putting in the RTI portion of our website under staff, on the staff. Because what we want to do is put these resources in your hands. Because we can get out there and give you all these resources, but if you've got them before we get there, it's even better. So if you go into RTI and go under Tier 1 interventions, and we're going to have this saying Tier 1, Tier 2, and Tier 3 interventions, just like this. There you go. Tier 1 interventions for behavior. You click on that. Hyperlinks you click on, David. Click on rewards and praise. Then it gives you why I should do it, when I should do it, how I should do it, how can I do it, and then it gives you a whole nother list of resources. Click on one of those hyperlinks. Jackpot, I do this for classroom. Boom, right there for your teachers. So you're going to have stuff more at your fingertips. We found this, it's called Polk Elementary. We just stumbled on it in one of our efforts to find more behavior interventions, and they've given us the go-ahead to use whatever and anything we found on there. And so Ashley is so graciously, and Casey is so graciously helping us to put this in your hands. So we started with Tier 1. It's a little bit of a process, but we hope to get the Tier 2 and Tier 3 up soon. But really, Tier 1 is where you're going to be with most of your kids. You really are. I mean, you're only going to have that's going to be 80% of your kids, you know, if you're thinking about it. The next 15% is going to be Tier 2, and you're only going to have 2 to 3% of your kids that you're going to be really dealing with that have really severe behavior. So we want to make that. I wanted to show you that because that was really exciting. I about fell out of my chair when I saw that. So when you deal with a student that's having some behavior issues, you want to be sure that you're giving these teachers access to some of these interventions and helping them process through that. If those tiered interventions are not working, pull back up that launcher. What we want you to do is to go into that behavior referral, and we want you to pull up the B forms, okay? B1, 2, and 3. I'm not sure, they're almost like cuss words, I think, in some schools. But the B forms are really documentation that you can start way early. B1 form is something you can start as soon as you see a kid or a student that's just not looking like everybody else. That teacher can go in there and start looking at what the behaviors are. They can start applying those interventions. They can put some start dates, some end dates. Was it effective? Was it not? You know, that's the data that we're asking in order to kind of process through this behavior referral. So there's B2, that's interventions and strategies. So the teacher fills out B1 and 2. And then successful, we just stick with Tier 1 interventions. That's your data that says we're working through this. This is working just right. If it's not, then what you want to do is you want to move on to Tier 2 interventions. On this form it says, again, utilize the Tier 2 interventions in the RTI folder, SST folder. We're going to get those Tier 2s up on the website as well. And continue documentation. If unsuccessful, a campus behavior designee can collaborate with the SST, the parent, teachers to complete the behavior request, which is the B3. That's what you're going to do in your SST meeting. And we need a consent form signed by the parent, which is really just something that kind of covers us so that we can come out and the parent is aware that we're checking things out, that we're looking at their kiddo. It just gives us a little bit of legal back. And then you're going to complete all those forms and you're going to give them downtown to me. Either you can upload them into DMAC. We know some schools that really went above and beyond and got them uploaded. You can send them to me by email. The behavior support team is going to continue to meet on a weekly basis as a triage group, and we'll look at these behavior referrals weekly and assign them on a weekly basis. And someone should be on your campus within 7 days of you sending it to me, so that we get somebody out there and we can start looking at what's going on and what's not. But then it gives you the examples that you need to send in, the B1, 2, 3, the consent form, any other pertinent data. You know, certainly, you know, if someone does walk in and they've got a psychological evaluation from Rose Street, that's pertinent. But we can't really upload some of that stuff into DMAC, so some of that stuff may need to be transported a little bit more gingerly. We don't want that out floating around out there. So that may be something that you send downtown in a confidential folder, something like that. But it will help us to get to you a lot faster. Let's see, the consult will be assigned to a team member. That team member is going to come out and collaborate with you and your staff. We're going to do observations. We'll make assessments. We'll hopefully, if necessary, we can make a recommendation that the SST or the ARD look at an FIE. If it's a student that's not in special ed, we're going to look at a possible recommendation for full and individualized evaluation. that might include that psychological. There's also a point there where you might want to start looking at a 504 evaluation, just like we heard David speak earlier about those impairments. Some of those impairments can be taken care of through that 504 service plan. So you can also start to look at that. But if the student is unsuccessful at that tier 2 level of intervention, and we most definitely want to look at tier 3 intervention, which is pretty much evaluation either by a 504 committee or by psychologists. So we really want to be looking more intensely at it. And it's not meant to be a process, and I really welcome feedback from any and all of you, because this process only works if it works for you. So, let me know, keep me informed. Does it work? Does it not work? We don't want it to be a burdensome process. We want to be able to give y'all help within a couple of weeks, and we want to be able to make a difference within a few weeks. We know sometimes that, the special ed process is pretty lengthy. I mean, it can go anywhere from 60 days to a year to get a student in special ed. And it really should, because that's something that will follow them for a long time. But we do want to provide you with that support. Then, of course, the Tier 3 SST and our committee will determine if recommendations are necessary. Recommendations for the psychological will be completed by an LSSP. If we do have outside evaluations, we'll have our LSSP look at that. Sometimes they can accept it, sometimes not. And if the student qualifies for SPED or special education, we'll go ahead and hold an order to start services. And the BST is not going to drop it. They're going to send you a consultation summary, which is a new form this year. They'll send you that consultation summary and give you an idea of where we're going with it. So your principal, your campus behavior designee, your SST are going to all know, where the direction we're going to take with the student. And then we want to help you in the R process and the 504 service plan. We want to help you design whatever is necessary for that student to be successful on your campus. So anyway, with that said, did we get through all those B's? Did you click on them as I was talking about them? But those are going to be on the launcher, and then remember that those tier interventions on your website. Oh, the B3 is a form that's really meant to be completed by you, and there's a part that says for the parent home information. That's not necessarily meant to be sent home for the parent to complete, but more as an interview with a teacher and parent to sit down and try to give us some idea of if the behaviors are similar, are we seeing same things going on at school at home. But that's just a little piece of home information that we like to take on. And then at the end of that B3 form is the signatures for all the SST members that were there when we actually talked about the student. You guys do a super job of this process. Y'all have blown me away how awesome you are at dealing with these kids, and we really do appreciate it. It helps make the process a lot more streamlined. Any questions about that behavioral referral process? Yes, sir.
I have a question about the process. I have a question in reference to the terminology.
Okay.
You're saying behavior RTI. When I go back here on the site, I don't necessarily have a link that says behavior RTI. I just have RTI. So are we up on the same umbrella? The way it's all RTI, from my point of view, from the teachers, is more so on the academic side.
Right.
Now you're coming for behavior. So maybe we need another, subset of this up on the information.
We're actually, Ashley already spoke about that. We want to be sure that these links go to behavior RTI, so it will eventually say behavior RTI interventions. But when I was clicking on some of those hyperlinks, it is taking you right to best practices in education and teaching. It doesn't just stop at what are we going to do about this behavior, but it goes straight to how are we going to teach reading? How are we going to teach language? How are we going to teach writing? So it's even going beyond. Actually, I think behavior and academic RTI really should kind of marry. I think they're one and the same in some situations. So, but we are going to keep it separate for you. We're going to make it more clear as an RTI on the forms. Mm-hmm. Okay, I'll look at it. I will. I'll try to make it as clear as I can. I don't want it to be confusing. So let me take a look at it. And then one other thing, I was going to print y'all out one of these because I knew y'all needed some extra reading. This is a 46-page US Gov Ed document on restraint seclusion. And I'm teasing about that because I know you don't need anything extra to read. No more assignments, sorry. But it's just a new document because, you know, they continue to try to impress upon educators how important it is to try to deal with behavior in the most positive way that you possibly can. And I'd just say that to just say that probably the state is going to be sending out new mandates really soon about what they want us to be is restraint-free. They don't want us to do restraint whatsoever. There was a piece in here I thought was kind of interesting. It says, restraint and seclusion it says restraint or seclusion should not be used as routine school safety measures. That is, they should not be implemented except in situations where a child's behavior poses imminent danger of serious physical harm to self or others, and not as a routine strategy implemented to address instructional problems or inappropriate behavior. As a means of coercion, retaliation, or as a convenience. And the other thing that I thought that was kind of interesting, it gave these 50 principles that were really pretty good to follow, which I think we all do. But the other thing was to come up with these behavior plans or come up with behavior interventions that are going to help those students that are so physically. Because it's kind of funny, sometimes I think these people have never seen some of the kids that are doing that, right? You know, they've never had the kick in the kneecap or, you know, they've never had to deal with it. But I do understand the importance of it. And I am still a CPI trainer, and as I look across this room, I'm trained or am training and continue to train most or all of you. It's good to have that crisis team trained on your campus. Most of our campuses have anywhere from top 5 to 15 staff on campus training as a good rule. And we'll be sending out those, I'll be sending out the training days soon. I also have decided, it's been tough, but I've done it a couple of times, I think I can survive it, but I'm going to condense that 2-day training into one so that it doesn't feel like it's such a huge burden to get staff to do a 2-day training, because I realize now it's a full day training. It's a full 8-hour day. I'm looking around and see who did that with me this summer. It's a full 8-hour day, but I think it's really worth it to get staff trained in it, especially some of your SPED staff and some of your teachers that work with the kids that are going to be more physical, you know. And it's really about meeting the needs of the student. And usually when we meet the needs of the student, the behavior is not as severe. So anyway, just be looking for that. I'll be sending that out in an email, and I'll send you the link to this document. It's a good document to take a look at and not impress upon, because I think we do a really good job. We've never in my history been even pointed at as far as restraint goes, and so I think we've done a really good job over time to deal with those severe kids. I think that's pretty much it. You recently received something from Durham on busing regulations, student behavior, consequences. That doesn't necessarily apply to your SPED kids. It specifically applies to gen ed, but your SPED kids, you're going to have to look a little differently, some of them especially. Because that's going to throw us into all kinds of problems if we don't. So if you're unclear on that, you can contact me or David or Suzanne, and we'll try to help figure that out. Are y'all going to love me if I let you go? Are there any questions at all? I don't want to speak through the process. You guys know how, you all know how, should know how to get a hold of me.